Fine. So what we'll do is we'll study Testng. Okay, and we'll first see how to configure Testng inside Eclipse. And before that, let me explain you what's the importance of Testng. Okay. Now, if you are making a project, okay, if you are making up a project, then you need a lot of things in it. Okay, you need to have test cases executed, right? You need to have the logs generated, you need to have the reports generated, the data has to be read from XLS file, XML file, properties file, right? Apart from that, you have requirements like uh, you need to have reports in HTML, you need to have reports in Excel based formats. Fine. So there are a lot of other intrinsic things as well. Then you need to store the screenshots of the errors, right? So to manage all these things, we use frameworks like Testng or JUnit and all. So right now we'll be using Testng and we'll be seeing how Testng works, and it helps us to implement a scenario like this wherein it can manage the test cases, run them in a sequential order, generate reports, logs, read data from the Excel files, generate screenshots of the errors and all. So this is a centralized controller, right? Selenium as a tool is only present under this section. Okay, Selenium is integrated with Testng and we are able to generate reports, and the actual testing is carried out with Testng. Testng is a tool which is not specifically meant for Selenium, right? But it is used a lot with Selenium. It can be integrated with Selenium. It's basically for unit testing. Fine. So let's start with Testng. Okay, hold on. Right. What we'll do is that the first thing is that you need to install Testng. Okay. To install Testng, Testng gets installed as an add-on inside Eclipse. Right. You need to go to Google and type Testng Eclipse. Right. So you'll get the first link. Go over here. Okay, inside it you have the link install the plugin. You click over here, and for Eclipse 3.4 this is the link. For 3.3 and below this is the link. I guess everybody has got 3.4. okay, you copy this particular link. Fine, go to your Eclipse, go to help, install new software. Okay, hit the URL, hit the enter button. Okay, Testng will be selected, right? Will come up. You paste the URL, hit the enter button, select Testng, keep on clicking on next, and Eclipse will also restart, and Testng will get installed as a plugin inside your Eclipse. Once it gets reinstalled, you can test whether Testng is installed or not. Okay, you can test it like this. You can go to Window, Show View, Other, and under Java you will see Testng. That means Testng, this icon, if it comes up, that means Testng is successfully installed. Alright, now let me make a new project, new Java project, day 6 in the training, right? And what we'll do is, hold on, right? In this project, in the source folder, I'll make a new package. Okay, I'll make that package and I'll call it as test cases. Fine, right? It's like a folder inside the source folder, right? Suppose inside it I make a new class named as, say, session test. Okay, right? Now this class will come up public class session test. Okay, generally you should keep the T capital. It's a good nomenclature in Java language. Okay, now I write session test, and in this class I can implement Testng and I can make test cases. I'm not talking about Selenium right now. Okay, so you make a test annotation @test and write public void test login. Fine, you make this annotation @test and you write public void test login and move your mouse over this annotation, right? add the testng library, you will see this is known as an annotation. This means that this function becomes a test case. Okay, so when you move your mouse over this, you will actually get the option to add the testng library in the project. Okay, you add the testng library, you will see the testng library being added over here. Fine, and now you move your mouse again, you will see the option to import the test annotation. You import it, it gets imported from this library only. This library has got nothing but testng.jar. This jar file came into your system when you actually downloaded and configured testng. Okay, now this becomes your test case. Okay, inside it you can write system.out.println login test. Okay, the video is getting recorded, I'm recording it somewhere else. Fine, and when you run this, okay, it prints over here that total test runs are 1. Fine, that is there is one test case which got executed. Fine, you again run this, you will find that total test cases executed are 1, and you will see another tab over here, results of running the class. In this you will see the test login getting executed. This green means that it's everything is fine, the green color, right? If it fails, then the red color comes up. We'll see that in some time. If you refresh this project, fine, you will have a test output folder generated. Okay, this test output folder, if you expand it, you will see the normal index.html. This will have the reports. Automatically HTML reports are generated, though the reports are not very impressive. Fine, they are there. We will see how to generate better reports. Those are XSLT reports. They can be generated with Ant or Maven. We will look at that, especially Maven we will be doing with the framework. So when we do the Maven with the framework, we will see how to generate better reports. This is just a simple report test login, it's saying pass, but we look at better reports later on. Fine. Similarly, you can have other test functions in this class. For example, @test, public void, say test. After logging in, you need to send mail. Okay, so you can write over here send mail test. Alright, then you can have another test case known as, say, logout. Okay, so you can simply write inside it logout test. Fine, so when you run this, it executes 3 test cases. Okay, and in the console you'll see it's executed 3 test cases. But there's a catch over here. The order. Okay, the order is not maintained. First logout test is printed, then login test, and then send mail test. The order in which you actually write them in the class is not the same as the order in which this is printed. Fine? Okay, first logout is getting executed, then login is getting executed, then send mail is getting executed. So the order is not the same. Okay, so how do you make the order same? How do you adjust all these things? How do you make sure that the first login test is executed, then send mail, and then logout? You have to set the priority of each test case for that. You can mention that the priority of this test case is 1. Okay, you can mention over here that the priority of this test case is 2, and you can mention over here that the priority of this test case is 3. So with the help of priority attribute over here, okay, when you run this, it will execute 3 times, but this time the test cases will be executed in a serial order. So in testng you can have the priority attribute over here, with which you can make sure the priority in which you want to write the tests. Inside these test annotations you can write your testng code, or the Selenium WebDriver code. Okay, we will do that later on, but let me first tell you the basics. Fine. Now coming over to validations. How do you do the validations in Testng? Validations are done through something known as assertions. Fine. If I am writing over here assert, assert is a class which helps you to do the validations. Generally in testing we compare the expected and the actual value, right? So this assert class helps us to do that. If you write assert dot assert equals, make sure you use assert equals function from org.testng. It's also there in JUnit. Don't use it from there. Use from org.testng.assert. Okay, you give two values. Say I write over here sorry, value A and expected value as also value A. Both of them match, so this assertion will pass. Okay, if I run the program, you will see that in the output all the three tests are passing. Fine. If I make it A and B, okay, if I change the expected value, the actual is the first one, the first parameter is actual value, right? So if I change the expected to B, both of them are not matching, and when you run this, automatically you will see that the one would be the failure. Failures are 1. Okay, this particular test is failing, and over here you will see the small section as well describing why it is failing. It was expected B, but it was found A. Okay, so assertion helps you to validate stuff. It can help you to fail a test case in case, suppose you have to match the titles of the page. So from driver.getTitle in Selenium, you can get the title and you can match it with the expected value using an assertion, and you can pass or fail your test case. Okay, similarly there is another assertion method known as assert.assert true. Okay, in this you have a condition and a message. If this condition, I can give any condition, say 4 greater than 3. Okay, this is always true. Okay, and some message. Right, first understand what this is doing and then I'll tell you how this is used. Okay, 4 greater than 3 is always true. Assert true means that if this condition evaluates to true, then the assertion will pass. If this condition evaluates to false, then this assertion will simply fail. And whatever is the message written over here will be thrown in the error. Assert true is to make sure that the condition is evaluating to true. When you run this, it will pass. Fine, it will pass over here. But the moment you write 4 greater than 13, okay, this is false, right? So assert true will fail, and error will, whatever error message you write over here, that will come up in the log. So if you run this, you will see that see, it is failing. Expected true but found false, and ERR message is getting printed over here. This is the same error message which you write over here. So whatever error message you write over here will come up. See that in reports this XXXX is written. Now why do we use this kind of assertion? Why do we need to use this kind of assertion? Look, the thing is, sometimes you want to find the presence of an element on the page. So you can have is element present function over here, which will check whether a particular element is present on the page or not. If it evaluates to false, then you can throw the error message something like that element not found or something, right? Or link not found. Okay, so over here earlier we had made a function, right? Is element present. Similarly, you can call that function over here, is element present. If that element is not present, then you can throw the error message like that. Okay, so this is how assertions are used. Okay, they are used to validate. Now please note one thing, assertions are little destructive in nature. Destructive means that I am printing login test start over here. Okay, and I print login test end over here. Fine. And if I run this, obviously this assertion will fail. Right. If I look at the output, you will see that login test start is getting printed, but end is not getting printed. The line on which the assertion fails, right, the program stops on that line, the test case stops. But the next test case, it starts to execute. After that, send mail test gets executed. Okay. But do you guys see something weird over here in the flow? Do you guys see something weird? What is the issue? Look, if the login test is failing, right? Yeah, login test end will not print because assertion will not. If assertion fails, then program will stop on this line. Okay, but as taking a practical scenario, if you are not able to log in, then why should you execute your send mail and logout test cases? This is also one of the things. That why should you execute your send mail and logout test cases when you are not even able to log in? You are getting my point, right? Okay, so well, it's a simple thing. How to fix this? This is the question. How do I fix this that the send mail and the logout test should not get executed? That's not a negative point for testng, but you can fix it. You can write over here that this send mail test is comma, you put a comma and there is a function over here depends on methods, that this function depends on methods. You give it as an array that test login, that this depends on the login test, right? Similarly, you give it over here that it depends on the login test as well, or if or some other test case as well, multiple test cases, you can give the name separated by a comma. Okay, right? So these two test cases I have made dependent on the login test. Only if the login test passes, these will execute. Okay, yeah, yes, Nijo, yes. Okay, but generally we don't complicate the scenarios like this. Okay, when you run this, you will see that the first test case fails, the other two are yellow. Yellow means they are skipped. Okay, if initially the first test case fails and the other two they get skipped. Fine. If the first one I just compare A with A, it will pass. Fine. When it passes, the other two also get executed. Okay, so these are the very basic fundamentals of testing. You can build test cases, you can generate reports, okay, you can execute the tests, you can make the test cases dependent, you can prioritize your test cases, okay, you can run the test cases in batch. This is just one file, session test.java. I can make 10 different Java files. I can have test cases in all the 10 different Java files, and I can run all the Java files together. I'm just executing one Java file. Okay, right? So moving ahead, right? Moving ahead, hold on. Can we group them? We don't want to write in. Yeah, Nino, you can group them. I'll tell you everything. Just be with me. You will come to know. Okay. Now, there are few things which you want to do before starting a test case and after starting a test case. After ending a test case, sorry. So for that, we have annotations like this. Before test. Okay, whatever function you write over here, for example public void start. Okay, move your mouse over this error, import it, right? You can write over here system.out.println starting, and then you have got another annotation at the rate after test. Okay, you can have a function known as public void end, and you can write over here ending. Fine. So when you run this, if you look at the output, it prints starting in the beginning, it executes everything, and it prints ending in the end. It doesn't matter if your test case is failing. If I compare A with B, right, and run this, if you look at the output, then starting is printing, then login test start, the other two test cases are skipped, and ending is printed in the end. So if you want to do some pre and post steps before or after executing all the test cases, you can do that with the help of these functions. Okay, there are many other annotations. Okay, there are many other annotations. Look, you can have a look at this complete training video 9. Okay, it's for 5 hours for Testng. Okay, the videos which are there on the website, the pre-recorded videos, are more elaborate. Okay, if you look at the modules on frameworks and all, they are very huge. They are over 8 hours or something each module. Okay, in the online training, it becomes a little tough for me to cover so many things. Like in Testng, there are so many things, right? There are other annotations as well. You can have a look at this tutorial. In that, I have shown many other, and I've shown Testng very elaborately. Okay, right now also I'll show you elaborately, right? Okay, but not to that extent where I have told you in that particular tutorial. Right now, no, module 9 is not having 45 minutes. Gaurav, I'll tell you it is not 45 minutes. You just saw the part 1 of it. It's divided into various parts. Okay. Now, moving ahead. Okay, moving ahead. Yeah, Ninu, I'll tell you that by the end of the class. Okay. Now, the next thing is that if I want to execute one test case with multiple sets of data, okay, how do you do that? For example, I make a new class, right, and I call it as simple as login test. I am taking very simple names right now. Okay, and over here I made a simple test case at the rate test public void do login. Right, so you start the bracket, end the bracket, import the test annotation, right, inside it print system.out.println testing, right, and when you run this, it prints testing as well. That is okay. Right, now if I want to log in with different sets of usernames and passwords, suppose inside it I am writing the WebDriver code which will log me inside the website. Okay, I want to log in with different sets of usernames and passwords, right? For that we have got another annotation known as @data provider. Okay, what this data provider does is that it supplies the data to this test case, right? For example, hold on, look, what we do is that we make a two-dimensional object array. Okay, inside it we have got rows, and inside it we have got columns. Okay, there are certain number of rows and certain number of columns, right? Number of rows are equal to number of times you want to run a test case. Okay, and number of columns are equal to the number of test data types you have. For example, you have got a username, a password, say the browser on which you want to execute the test, the expected result and all. So all these things are your data, right? This the first row will hold the data for the first test case. Second row will hold the data for the second test case. Okay, probably this can be some other username, some other password, some other browser, okay, some other expected result, right? And each row can hold the data for a separate test iteration. Right. So what this data provider does is that it returns you a two-dimensional object array. You import the data provider. Okay. This will return your two-dimensional object array. Right. You can create an object array like this object array called data equals to new object array with say 3 rows and 2 columns. That means I want to execute my test 3 times. In these brackets, rows they come first and columns they come after that. Okay, in this you have got 3 rows and 2 columns. Okay, you need to fill your data provider. You need to fill it like this, that is data 0 0 equals to username 1. Okay, this is the first row. Okay, right, 0 1, it can be say the password 1. Fine. Similarly, you can fill up all the 3 rows. You can write row 1, row 2, U2 P2, U3 P3, and in the end you write return data. Okay, you'll return the data from this data provider. So these are the first 3 rows. I put the data inside the two-dimensional object array. I put the data inside the first 3 rows. Right. Okay. So what will happen is that this is the test case. This is the data provider. The data provider will provide the data to this test case. To this test case, you will have to mention that the data provider, okay, data provider for this test is get data. That this test case is getting the data from this particular data provider. Alright, this is very important. If you don't mention, then you are not actually linking both together. Okay, you need to mention this. And another thing, the number of input parameters in the test, right, should be equal to the number of columns. We have got 2 columns over here, username and password. So number of input parameters inside this test case, do login, should be equal to number of columns which are over here. If there are 2 columns, then you should have 2 input parameters. If there are 3 columns, then you should have 3 input parameters. So what will happen is that when you run this now, automatically Testng will read the test case. It will see that the data is coming from this function. It will go inside this function, create an object array, put the data inside it, then call the test function 3 times. First time when it calls, it will supply U1 in username and P1 in password. Okay, I can print it. Username plus password. Sorry. Next time it calls, it will again print the username and password for the second iteration and for the third iteration. Okay, so this is the second row actually. Third row. Okay, so when you run this, you'll see that, see this thing is printed 3 times. Okay, and in the result, the same test case is executed 3 times with different sets of usernames and passwords. So this is what basically Testng does. It helps you to organize your test cases, make your test cases, parameterize them with different sets of usernames and passwords. Okay, now going back over here, I told you that assertion stops the execution. Right? You can make assertion to not stop the execution. Okay, we'll talk about that later on. There was just a question being asked. We'll talk about that later on. Right. Now, yeah, that's what I'm going to talk now. What if the test is failing? If I write over here assert dot assert true or assert equals, right? Say actual is username, expected is u3. I'm checking if the username is equal to u3 or not. No, for all the iterations username will not be u3 or username equals to u1 or not. So for first it will pass, for the rest two it will fail. Okay, if I write over here u3, for first two it will fail and for the third iteration it will pass. If you run this, right, if the assertion fails over here, the other tests will execute. Okay, because for only the last iteration the username is u3. Okay, but the question arises, if the assertion fails, we want to report the error but we want to move forward. We want to execute the complete test. Sometimes suppose you are comparing the titles of the page. Now titles, if they do not match, that's fine. If there is some spelling mistake, that's fine. You want to continue forward. Okay, you want to continue forward. You just don't want to stop there like that. Okay, so there can be scenarios where you want to just terminate your test case. Okay, right. So hold on just 1 minute. Just a minute, guys. Yeah. So at times what happens is that you don't want to terminate your test cases, right? So you have got an option, right, to continue forward or to terminate. That is there in Testng. Fine. We'll talk about that later on. Okay, you'll have to use adapter class into that. You'll have to use listener into that. We'll talk about listeners later on. Fine. But for time being, understand that that is possible. Okay, it's not that you can you cannot move away from it. It's possible. Right. Now moving further. Okay. Moving further. Over here, if I create a new class, or hold on, if I want to run both these Java files together, login test and session test, I want to run both of them together. Till now we are running single file at one time, right? Okay, what if I want to run both of them together? Okay, you can do that. It is very simple. You can make use of a file known as testng.xml. Hold on. Hold on. Yeah, you can use this file testng.xml. You should keep testng.xml under your project. Okay, it's an XML file which will actually hold the complete information of the tests which you want to run together. The first line in this file is the name of the suite. Okay, I'm just giving it as my sample suite. Then the first test case, okay, the first test which you want to execute is session test, and the class corresponding to that you have to give over here, that is inside the test cases package. This is the test cases package, right? Under the source folder there is a test cases package. Under that, okay, the file session test is present. Make sure you give the right name, okay, over here, otherwise it will not work if you make a mistake in the name, right? Similarly, after that you want to execute, say, the login test. Okay, Again, make sure you are giving the right name. Right. So the order in which the test cases are mentioned in this particular file, in the same order they get executed from top to bottom. Okay. If you run this testng.xml, you can right click on testng.xml and select run as testng suite. So the complete suite will get executed. Okay. When you run this, run as testng suite. So what will happen is that if you look at the results, you see that sessions test got executed first. The first test case failed, the rest two skipped. In login test, the first two failed and the third one got passed. Right. And you will have the HTML reports as well. If you refresh the project, you in the test output folder, you will have index.html. Fine. Hold on. It will look something like this. Right. Not very impressive. Okay. Later on, we'll see how to make the what do you say, the testng XSLT reports and all with Maven, so that at that time it will have more clarity to you. Okay, so with this XML file testng.xml, you can execute the test cases in a batch. Fine. Okay, right. Anyone with any questions till now? Anyone with any questions? No questions?